Yo, what is up, everybody? Ceresco back again with another chapter from our zombie story titled 50 Days After the Apocalypse, written by Rupert Rollingson. Hopefully, you guys have been enjoying the previous chapters. Remember to show love to the author with the links in the description. Like, comment, and subscribe. Chapter 6 Other Survivors. Amy slowly drifted awake, her eyes fluttering open, and she took in her surroundings. She was sat in the same position she had been in last night. Her hockey stick lay between her legs, where she had dropped it when at some point in the night she had fallen asleep. There was a slight movement beneath her head. Immediately returning to consciousness, Amy bolted upright, quickly looking sideways to see what had moved. On her left sat John, apparently deep in sleep. Quickly, Amy realized that she must have fallen asleep on the man. This was embarrassingly confirmed by a small patch of drool where her head would have been. As she became more awake and the memories of the previous day returned, the girl couldn't help but stare at the peaceful face of her companion. John's face was slightly haggard, not helped by the patches of stubble that dotted his chin and neck. His hair was matted, and a mixture of congealed substances gave it a gel-like effect. The cut that had almost blinded John yesterday had scabbed over, and the man had wiped the drying blood away from her eye, making it usable again. Are you watching me sleep again? Amy blushed bright red. She quickly mumbled out some weak excuse. John let a small smile slip onto his face as he opened his eyes. Trying to distract from the situation, the embarrassed girl asked, "Have you slept yet?" Grabbed a few hours sleep after dawn, once I was sure the infected wouldn't break in." At dawn? What time is it? Instead of an answer, John handed her the watch. 11:17. Amy stared at the time for a few seconds before she quickly began to crawl along the floor, gathering up all their belongings. What are you doing? Well, we have to get moving. We need to search for... Amy trailed off as she remembered what had happened yesterday, before the desperate fight. Her eyes darted over to the bulging packs stuffed to the brim, the supplies the pair had raided yesterday. Physically relaxing, Amy slowly got to her feet and stretched, working out the kinks from sitting stock still all night. John made to follow her, but as soon as he stretched, his left shoulder flared with pain, and his right hand immediately shot to it. With a shaky laugh, the man tried to brush the action off, as brushing his shoulder, but it didn't fool Amy. The girl stomped over to him, moving his hand away and ignoring his protests, as she ripped open his destroyed t-shirt to look at the injury. She gasped when she saw it. John's left shoulder was extremely swollen and was already colored purple with bruising, probably from breaking down the door. Swatting his hands away, the girl pulled the scraps of clothing off the man. Close to half of John's body was covered in bruising, and a particularly bad patch over his right ribs suggested a broken bone, too. John, we need to get you to... What, huh? To a hospital? Don't be an idiot. I'm fine. And with that, the man stormed over to his pack, rooting through it to pull out his spare t-shirt. However, as he made to put it on, John found that he couldn't lift his arm any higher than shoulder height. Amy slowly approached him as he struggled to slip the garment on, slyly placing her hand on his normal shoulder, causing the man to freeze. Let me. The girl's hands slid across John's battered body, delicately taking hold of his left arm. Ever so slowly, Amy guided his arm through the sleeve, smiling sadly as John winced. Then, the man's hand slid out of the sleeve, but the woman didn't move away. The two of them suddenly realized how close they were. Mere centimeters separated their heads as both of them stared at each other. Amy began to move forwards, closing the distance. There was a sudden bang as an infected knocked into the door, as it stumbled into the door as it patrolled the corridor. The teenagers quickly separated, the light tinge of red decorating both of their features. John coughed as he looked back at his companion. We should probably get out of here. Find a safer place to set up camp. He quickly moved over to the abandoned pile of items and began to pack them. Amy didn't respond as she silently set about the task. Within minutes, all their stuff was packed and the two were ready to leave, choosing to forego breakfast. Quietly as they could, the two of them unbarricaded the door and set off to the body of the building and out to the bloody streets still littered with the infected corpses. The day was hot. The sun scorched the blood-caked ground, producing a putrid smell that lingered in the air. Every now and then, a breeze would blow through the streets, offering a brief moment of respite in the stifling weather. The infected were hardly to be seen as they sought the cool darkness of the buildings in an effort to protect against a quick decomposing rate. John and Amy cautiously stalked the streets, still wary of ambush after yesterday. Both of the survivors were covered in sweat from a mere hour of walking in the open sun, and their tempers were starting to fray. That was when a scream of pain and terror echoed down the street. Amy took a step in the direction of the scream before she remembered the last time this had happened. She remembered Andrew Roberts and his daughter. She remembered the cruel way her partner had let him die in an attempt to further his understanding of the infected. Amy glanced at their companion. She could see the same thoughts were going through his mind. Another scream echoed down the street. more desperate now. That did it. Before John could do anything, Amy set off, sprinting through the streets. It took her 2 minutes to reach a tall building, at least 15 stories high, from which the screams were coming from. In front of the building, Amy could see a group of possibly a dozen infected crowding around an open doorway. In front of the doorway stood a boy about 14 years old, armed with a plank of wood, trying to keep the creatures out. Despite everything she'd learned since the horror began, Amy charged straight at the group. The first infected didn't even have a chance to turn around. The second didn't fare much better, as Amy forced her way through the group. The third infected lunged at her, but Amy nimbly sidestepped before bringing her bat down hard on the back of the creature's head. As the girl once again turned towards the doorway, she barely managed to lean back, avoiding a savage bite of the fourth infected. Trying desperately to back out of the thing's reach, Amy scuttled backwards, barely staying upright. But it was too slow. The infected took one long stride, grabbing Amy around the waist, raised his head to deliver a killer bite. A knife suddenly shot out from behind Amy's back, stabbing the infected through the eye, killing it instantly. The weapon was quickly pulled back, and Amy turned with it to look at her savior. John stood there, blood covering his fresh clothes, 2 more corpses behind him. Look, let's finish this first, then we'll have a long talk about safety. Amy felt her anger build at being disregarded. Turning back to the fight, she saw John, bloody knife in his left hand and the trusty hockey stick in his right, swiftly kill the 7th member of the pack. By the doorway, 2 of the infected grappled with the boy, while the 3rd attempted to stalk around the scuffle to flank the defender. Another echo screamed out the doorway. As Amy watched, the boy swung his plank sideways, knocking his 2 attackers off their feet, dealing with them the 2 swift strikes before turning to the 3rd. To the girl's right, John jumped backwards, dodging a vicious swipe of a clawed hand before using his longer reach to slam his hockey stick to the monster's temple. An animalistic smile crept onto the man's face as he watched the creature collapse to the ground, like a puppet that had its strings suddenly cut. Amy strode up to the last of the infected, tightly gripping her bat in both hands. Then, in one large swing, she released all of her anger. The creature fell to the ground, head caved in. Taking a minute to catch her breath, Amy slowly turned to face the doorway, studying the boy. He was stood just inside the doorway, still holding his large wooden plank. He had short black hair and was quite tall for his age, nearing 6 foot perhaps, already taller than Amy. But what caught her attention was his eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had seen and done terrible things. The eyes of someone was dead inside. They were the exact same eyes as Amy's companion. Another scream broke Amy out of her thoughts as John began to speak. "Look, we're here to help. Let us inside before the infected overrun the place." It was a command, not a question. Amy was about to reprimand John, for she heard the characteristic shuffling of feet and turned to see 3 more infected around the corner. The boy hesitated for a moment before nodding and motioning for the 2 to follow him inside. John followed, weapons held, ready. Taking one last look around, Amy ran inside the building after them, eager to avoid another fight. The group had been walking through the dimly lit offices for about 5 minutes. The strange boy silently leading, with Amy and John following a few footsteps behind. As another scream from further above died away, John started to talk to Amy, quietly so the boy could not hear them. "That was foolish. Not only did you run towards a place you knew infected would be, you also charged into a large group. Almost got yourself killed. Were you even thinking?" Although he was whispering, it was clear how angry John was, and Amy refused to back down. "I was thinking." "Then tell me, what thought could have possibly led you to be so stupid?" The girl got angry. She knew John was right. She knew she had risked both their lives to save someone they had never met. But there was no way she was going to let him call her stupid. "Look, I feared the devil behind me far more than the monsters in front." A pained look crossed the man's face before his usual mask went up. Then, just as John was about to respond, the boy opened the door to the office from which the screaming was coming from. The office was relatively empty, except for a few scattered papers and the door to the adjoining office. Next to the wall was a small oak desk that in the old world would have been very expensive. Now, though, it was just a useful piece of furniture for an unnamed boy to use as a barricade. Pressed against the opposite of the wall, with her hand pressed to her side, was a screaming ginger-haired girl. Amy could see fresh blood seeping out underneath the girl's hand as it pressed into her left side. "Please help me. Those things, they bit me." John walked further into the room, setting down his backpack and hockey stick on the floor, and jamming his knife between a belt loop as he walked towards the girl. Amy worriedly moved forwards, already knowing what was about to happen. As John got within a few steps of the girl, the boy appeared to Amy's left, mumbling something. "Sorry, what was that?" Amy asked, leaning closer to the boy. The boy mumbled the words again. This time, they were dreadfully clear. "I'm sorry." Before Amy could do anything, the boy had slipped behind her and was now holding a knife to her throat as a man burst in through the adjoining door, tackling John to the ground. Amy reacted quickly, grabbing the knife hand of the boy and pulling it away, but the other hand came up, wrapping it tightly around her neck. Amy struggled against her attacker, swinging her cricket bat behind her to try and hit him. When that failed, she dropped the bat and began to claw at the hand with her nails, carving bloody cuts into the limb. Coughing from lack of air as the world began to dim around her, Amy tried one last thing. With all her remaining strength, Amy swung her foot backwards, aiming for between the boy's legs. Bullseye. The boy released her with a yell of pain, collapsing to his knees. Amy stumbled away, panting and coughing intermittent. As she turned to look for her bat, she saw the boy once again on his feet, bat in hand and fire in his eyes. Before Amy could do anything, the boy swung the bat, catching her on her chin and knocking her out. That, ladies and gentlemen, the end of our chapter.